So Tom Billinge for the third time. Lovely to have you on the podcast. Fantastic Instagram account that I came across, your WarYoga account. Brilliant, one of the most interesting accounts on there, to be honest. Tell me a little bit about your very interesting journey in martial arts.
Okay, yeah, cool. So I started in Muay Thai. I started in my early 20s. I started a bit later than other people. You know, some people start in the teens, and I got into it in my early 20s. I'm in my 40s now, mid 40s, so I've had about 2 decades in that. But I went to Thailand, discovered Muay Thai, fell in love with it, came back to England, trained in England, had a couple of fights, but nothing particularly notable. Then moved to Thailand in Asia. I actually lived in several places in Asia: Thailand, Hong Kong, Vietnam, China, and I kind of started to explore more than just the martial arts stuff. I was exploring the kind of the spirituality and mythology and stuff in that part of the world. And then after 6 years out there, I moved back to the West, initially into England again, before I came over to the United States. And so I came back and I had all this kind of Asian philosophical and sort of spiritual and martial stuff in my head. And I came back to Europe and I wanted to kind of like see what I could kind of connect to from Europe. I mean, so I'm half Greek and half English. Grew up in England, of course, but I grew up with like a lot of Greek mythology and stuff as a kid. I was always fascinated with, the sort of stories of the heroes and stuff like that. So I kind of wanted to reconnect with that a bit. So that was one part of it. And being English as well, I was always actually since a kid fascinated by the idea of the bare knuckle boxing and of the old time, So I started to explore that and see if I kind of reconstruct it a bit, coming from my kind of martial arts background, at that point, quite a few years in it. And so I kind of looking at old manuals and things like that, managed to what I think is a pretty good reconstruction of the various different stuff. There's what's called old school, new school, and new school, and they're all very different from what we look at as bare knuckle boxing today, because boxing today is informed by modern boxing, because that's the reference point that we have, or most people have. Like, nobody's really gone back and looked at all that old bare knuckle stuff. So I started doing that, really into that, and then I then got very interested in the Indian and then Iranian strength and conditioning systems for the wrestlers. In India, they've got something called Vyayam, which is their kind of system with maces and stones and all sorts of things for their Kushti wrestlers. In Iran, they've got Azurkhane, which is the house of strength, which is where they have like clubs and push-up stuff, which is for the Iranian wrestlers. And then I started to connect the dots a little bit and realize that they're all related, because the North Indians, which is where most of that stuff's in North India, actually, North Indians, Iranians, and Europeans are all descended from the same group of ancestors, which are the Indo-European people who came from somewhere in Central Asia, But basically, they brought. I started to realize there's a lot of connections all the way through. When you compare these different traditions side by side, and I'm currently now back on the Greeks again, from a WarYoga perspective to look at it, and again, I'm seeing so much connection into what the Indians and Iranians are doing now, and what the Greeks used to do, 2,000 years ago, which they stopped doing. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now. I've kind of realized I've got this concept of this sort of great Indo-European tradition that kind of goes across from sort of India all the way through Europe, and that they're all connected. And that's what's interesting is by looking kind of what's going on in the East, you can kind of see in some ways what we've lost in the West. And it's still there. It's just sort of all hiding under the surface. And so now I'm trying to sort of peel back layers and see what I can do and see what I can find, So that's
funny, isn't it?
Yeah. And now I practice a lot now. I teach Muay Thai now. I'm trying to reconstruct pankration, which is the ancient Greek kind of MMA. And I'm also a jiu-jitsu. I do jiu-jitsu. I'm a purple belt. I've been doing that for about 7 years now. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
Fantastic. It's very interesting, isn't it? How in the East, the sort of spiritual side of martial arts sort of stayed with it, but in the West, like I'm from a boxing background, and that's how I spent most of my life, to be fair. And there isn't really any of that. It's just the physical skill, and you know all the qualities are admired, and the toughness, the stoicism, all them things. But there isn't really sort of like a mindful sort of mental element to them, is there?
No, I think you're absolutely right. It's kind of interesting. I mean, if you look at the history of boxing in England, we probably had something before, but like it doesn't really re-emerge properly as boxing till about kind of early 1700s. There's this guy considered to be the sort of father of boxing. There's a guy called James Figg, and he was a quarterstaff and backsword fencer. So he used to fight people on stage with like a stick and a sword, and sometimes without anything at all, like just barehanded, bare knuckle. And so it kind of, our tradition kind of came out of that, and mixed as well with, because I mean, just like the English language kind of came out of various dialects, I guess our English boxing came out of various sort of regional, local festivals and events, and local people did things in certain ways. Which is why very early bare knuckle allowed all the wrestling moves. You know, you could have been a wrestler and fought in bare knuckle boxing, you know, because you're allowed to pick them up and whatever, you know. So like all the things like Cornish wrestling and Lancashire wrestling and Cumberland, you know, Cumberland Westmoreland wrestling, those guys all sort of participated to some degree too in that tradition, and it all kind of came into it. But none of those really had a spiritual element at that point, because I think what had happened was you know, obviously England, Great Britain was Christianized very early on, and the difference between the Asian traditions and the British traditions really is that the Asians, because they've had this continuum of like their spiritual tradition, it kind of grew with the fighting. So it kind of embedded itself, you know, like so Muay Thai is deeply embedded in with Buddhism, with a lot of Hindu kind of imagery and mythology in there, because that's how the Thai people's spiritual system developed, and that the boxing happened at sort of temple festivals originally and stuff like that. And the British, our things also, boxing happened at festivals, but they were like, you know, it was like a midsummer festival or this. And so there's a slight, like almost a glimmer of something there, you know, like midsummer was, of course, once a, you know, religious festival. By the time we were kind of like started the sort of resurgence of boxing, we'd lost the actual real connection. There was just this sort of vague notion that, oh, that's something you do at this time, you know. Yeah.
That's all really interesting. That's the sort of stuff I was hoping you were going to tell us about. So I do have a bit of an interest in the stone lifting as well. How are you finding all that, going out into nature and just lifting big rocks?
Oh yeah, I love it. So I've always liked lifting stuff up, like out in like stones and stuff. I always felt myself compelled, even when I was young, you know, just as something now I want to pick it up and mess around with it. And then in 2017, before I moved to the States, I ended up going to Iceland for 10 days with my wife and her family. And with no knowledge of any of the historical stones or any of that stuff, we went to Dritvik, just gets on the tour, this sort of the driving around route. And I saw the Dritvik stones. I was like, well, I'm definitely going to just right there. And then I was like, oh, I'll definitely try those. And I managed to, the first two I got up no problem, and then I managed to get the half stirk. I think I just go to my lap, basically. I didn't manage to check it at that time, but I mean,
that's a solid effort, isn't it? From off the bat, that's a solid effort. I mean,
it's funny because I'm not that big. So in pounds, I'm 165, so it's about 12 stones. you know.
Yeah,
and I'm like 5'10", so I'm like not like a big guy. I'm one of the, you know, if I'm in a competition, I'm normally with the small guys, you know.
oh yeah.
But you know, I just sort of fell in love with that, and you know, I kind of came to the States, and other things were happening. I was doing other things, but then, you know, I started really paying attention to what's going on with the stone lifting at the moment. You know, in the last kind of few years, there's been a bit of a kind of renaissance, you know, of stone lifting.
There was a couple of really good documentaries on Rogue's YouTube channel. I don't know if you've seen them, Full Step in the Stone.
Yeah, I saw them when they came out, and I was like, you know, it was just sort of fascinating to me, you know, that because what I love about it is that it's not just a physical exercise. There is a sort of like historical, mythological, and spiritual element, you know, and also in a way, like however you want to interpret that, because some people, you know, they have a different spiritual background. They're not interested in like anything, you know, to do with like the ancient ideas of some of the stones, but they feel the connection to the land or the ancestors, or they feel a connection to doing something really primal, you know. So there's something about it that definitely, you know, it attracts me to it, you know. And so I've been trying to sort of get better at it myself. I've been collecting some stones. My wife's getting pretty sick of me bringing stones. And so I've actually so far got 2 stones in my local area which I have left in place, and tried to sort of, I've pinned on a personal map, but I'm going to pin them on the map. I've actually got someone coming out to lift them today.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Are you still planning on coming to the UK next month?
Yes, I'm coming to the UK in September. I've got a workshop with Tom and Craig. So Tom's Eat Move Lift on Instagram, and Craig is the club's connoisseur. And so we're doing like a traditional Indian, Iranian, and Indian club strength workshop.
Sounds fantastic.
Yeah, I'm also going to go, but before that, I'm going to Cornwall. I've connected with some people that I'm going to go and do some Cornish wrestling. They've made a jacket.
Fantastic.
I'm going to have a jacket. Kind of excited.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and then you know, I'm gonna go and do the workshop in London, and then go up to see my dad and see my sister in the north, and then go across to the lakes. So I'm going to be in the lakes.
Fantastic. We'll have to catch up.
Yeah, we will. And I'd like to get a bit. I want to get a bit of stone lifting in up there. I know that the lakes are starting to be the destination now.
Yeah, well, we've got the stones are harnessed around with the King of the Strands. We'll sort you out the Cracket Walk and the Buttermere stone. The big walk stone. And then we've got the Fleetwood stones as well with the rings in, you know, a bit like the Dinnies. So one version of them. And then if you've got time for 2 venues, you can maybe come over here to Working on the coast as well. And we've got the Cumberland stones up at Rivendell. So I know you'll obviously be pressed for time because you weren't so long, but I'll happily give you a full tour when you get here, mate, and show you around a bit.
I mean, I'm really excited to go up there. Like, I've also connected in with a wrestling club up there. What's it called? The Kendal Wrestling Club, and they still do.
Brilliant! Is that Cumberland and Westmoreland club? Yeah.
Sorry.
Is that Cumberland and Westmoreland? Yeah.
Yeah, Cumberland, Westmoreland.
Fantastic.
So,
yeah.
You know,
because there really isn't much left.
Like traditional wrestling and traditional like stuff like that, and the thing is we should really be in the UK kind of like, you know, promoting those things, or at least like celebrating them, because they're really old and they're really a long part of our history. You know, they're older than tradition. You know, I mean, they're really old. As long as people have been hanging around and having like, so they do agricultural shows now, but as long as there've been festivals, there's been people getting together and wrestling each other, you know.
Oh, it is. It's the oldest thing in the world, isn't it? Men wrestling each other.
Yeah.
And it is, I think keeping them traditional sports alive is really important. That's what I'm trying to do with the stones. Over here, I'm trying to push the stones, get people into it. You know, my dream is that in 100 years, there'll be young lads lifting the stones. And, you know, then I'll start something that, you know, it gives kids something to aspire to forever, doesn't it?
Correct. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Something arduous.
something
And
that connects them to a place and connects them to the people who've been around before them too. I mean, there's something very powerful about that, and the fact that it gives them a chance to have something to strive for. Like, maybe they'll try it and be like, oh, I can't do it, but they know if they put in the work and they want to get that thing up, they'll be able to get it one day. It's like
that's right.
something really
Well, it's
powerful.
like, it's like the Dritwick stones, isn't it? Like if you wanted the big money on the fishing boats, you had to lift a full man's stone. You had to get the full man's wage, didn't you? So you think every parent in that area, when they had a little lad, they were saying to them, you get out on the backs and get them stones lifted, so you get a decent wage when you're older.
Yeah, right.
Kids are missing that now, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. I think it's actually one of the things which is a common theme in what I do, and then especially, and I've got other work too. So I write about. I've got 2 Greek mythology books that are not WarYoga, and I've got a 3rd one coming out this year too to complete that trilogy. And the thing about that is that what I focus on really is the idea that we don't really have those sort of rites of passage, like ancient people.
No.
And all of our ancestors collectively, like wherever you go in the world, there was always a rites of passage where for both different ones for men and women, but like I think the reality is men in particular really need some kind of rite of passage as a young man to know that they can, now I'm a man, now to have got through some ordeals and trials and difficulties in order to do that.
They all just breeze through life now, don't they?
Yeah, I think
it's easy.
It's the structure, right? They haven't got a structure within which to, be able to aspire to grow into a particular role they can fulfill in society. Like adult men have a certain role in society that they've had since beginning of time. But the problem is like if without any kind of testing, without any sort of direction and understanding of what that role is and how to get there, how do you expect boys to become men? Like, how do you expect that?
They need that process of building a bit of character and stuff, don't they?
Correct.
It's all good for them. Sort of a bit of moral fibre, isn't it?
Absolutely correct. Yeah, that's absolutely right. They need that. I mean, end of the day, we have a rootless, shiftless society where people don't really know about their traditions or where they've come from. And like, okay, I can understand we live in a modern world and maybe people say, oh, we don't need those traditions. But the reality is having those traditions lets you know where you've come from. And if you know where you've come from, you can know where you're going.
That's exactly right, man.
Exactly right. What's easy, the worst thing you can be is completely rootless, shiftless, and know nothing about anything and don't, and then so easy to manipulate, so easy to control, so easy to do those things. Whereas people who know who they are and, and where they come from, they've got strong ideas about themselves already. So they can't be told you must do this or you must do that because, they're strong people who know who they are,
It's funny, isn't it? Because we're getting further and further away from all that tradition and stuff like that, aren't we? But it's funny because I think there's a little bit of counterculture now as well, isn't it? Because I think that there's more people trying to get back to that. Because I think the further we go, people are realising that that's probably a big part of what we've lost, isn't it, as a society?
Correct. Yeah, it is exactly what's happening. Like, I think the more that people are pushed in one direction, eventually they'll swing in a counter direction. So, it's the pendulum swing, but the thing is, it is a counterculture. It is a small group of people. But the thing is like that kind of what they call like the flame of tradition or whatever. It only needs a few people to keep that kind of fire, the embers going.
Right.
And eventually you can build it into a big fire again. And people can kind of like have that fire kind of illuminating their life, So it's a really important thing to have those people who I kind of think of people like that as keepers of the flame in a sense, they're trying to keep that fire alive, and it's only really the traditions and stuff only die out when the last people who are trying stop doing that.
Yeah. So with the tradition stuff, you've just been on a very interesting trip, haven't you? When we first started talking, I think you went to, was it Iran, and then a few other places after that.
Yeah. So
about that.
Second trip to Iran, actually. But yeah, I went to last trip I did this year was Azerbaijan, Iran, and Greece. And so Iran and Greece were the main focuses. Azerbaijan, I went to see a very interesting guy who was doing the kind of Iranian stuff, but he's in Azerbaijan, which is on the border of Iran. Yeah. So Iran's fantastic. It's obviously like any country, anywhere in the world, it has problems and people can't agree on how a country should or shouldn't be run, which is actually normal. Like it's very much demonized in the West as a country, but like if you go there, the people in Iran are like the people that you meet, the everyday people are possibly the kindest, friendliest, most welcoming people I've ever met. You know, they've got troubles, like especially with things like sanctions and stuff like that, means that, you know, people struggle a lot financially and through everyday life, but like they are so welcoming and kind in a genuine way where they don't want anything in return. So it's a fantastic country, regardless of what people think about their politics or government or whatever. The people and the country itself are incredible. And so, yeah, I went there to do the Iranian traditional sport, which is called Varzesh Pahlavani, which means the heroic sport, or the sport of champions, sport of heroes. It's basically strength stuff, which uses clubs and these push-up boards and a lot of aerobic sort of exercise, and then a lot of strength with like wooden shields that you have to push and press.
The big wooden boards with the handles in the middle.
Yeah. They're called sang. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah,
what's
beautiful.
Sang is sang. The name sang translates to stone, and so the original ones may have actually been made of stone. You know, maybe they can't be that big, but I mean, those wooden ones. Some of the ones they're lifting, I mean, they count it as a pair in kilos. So the guy, one of the guys I train with, Azim, he is the national champion for lifting the sang, and they have to do a whole sort of long routine, and it's very beautiful the way they lift them. But he does it with 100 kilos, so 50 kilos each arm, and it's done for like a really sort of a set routine. It takes quite a long time. Like he's basically pressing 250 kg boards for about 3 to 5 minutes. Which is
very impressive. It's very unwieldy, aren't they? They're so big. If people want to see them, again, Tom's Instagram, WarYoga, they are on there. Beautiful bits of kit as well. Absolutely beautiful looking bits of kit.
Oh,
so nice.
Unbelievable. So I actually have I had a pair made for me. They're in the UK at the moment. So I'm gonna be shipping them from the UK.
Oh, fantastic.
They're like just superb, just like really beautiful. It's basically the idea that you can make a functional thing that you use to get stronger into something that's beautiful too. Is kind of like because actually that's something again that we've lost, is this idea that because as beauty is a value, like that, because beauty is a value. Like if you're surrounded by things that are beautiful or nice, you know, rather than just like ugly things, you know, it changes your sort of feeling of emotion and your mental and spiritual being. So like I think
the old communist countries, don't you? Look at the old communist countries and the architecture. I was in Prague a few years ago, and they show you around the old communist block, and it's depressing, it's horrible. There's no beauty, is there? Just function.
It's designed for that, I think. I think it's designed to address your kind of human spirit, you know. It's designed to make you feel like, ugh.
Yeah, it definitely works.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Doesn't it?
You know, I mean, you look at some of the old, you know, the old council flat blocks they used to build in England back in the 60s and 70s, where it was all like function over form. And then you look at how they're all falling apart and horrible, and people hate them who live there. You know, the thing is, what's interesting is when they built the same kind of council buildings back in the 1920s and 30s, they weren't ugly, and they're still standing, and people still like them.
Right. It's
kind of interesting, like the choices that are made for what sort of surrounds you in terms of aesthetics is actually a really big deal.
Well, it's funny because at the start of the year, I actually went to Milton Keynes. And I don't know if you've ever been there,
It's not.
Um, but
I'm actually from Cambridge. I grew up in Cambridge, so it's not that far from where I grew up.
yeah, I thought that was like the most depressing place I've ever been at. I
Well, I
was
mean, you're in
actually,
a very beautiful part of the world. I mean, everywhere's a
I,
bit
we are spoiled in Cumbria.
you are.
It's beautiful here,
Yeah,
and I spent quite a bit of time outside of town as well, so I'm sort of double spoiled really.
well,
But I was there for the BKFC,
the
and it was
older
funny
I
because we
get,
were there for a great. Oh, sorry.
no, go on. I was saying, the older I get, the more I want to be in the countryside. Anyway.
I think we all feel a bit like that, don't we? And I think that's part of the appeal of the stones and stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's actually nicer being out. We go down the beach a bit, and we've got some stones on my friend's land. Saturday mornings, we'd all rather do that on a nice day than be in
Oh,
the gym.
100%.
Definitely beats it, doesn't it?
I mean, it's one of the things that's interesting about. So I've written a couple of books, the WarYoga books. And the first one was about India, and one of the things when I was writing and researching that was this concept that was originally by an academic called Joseph Alter. But he noticed something basically, which is the difference between the Indian traditional akhara, and akhara is like a wrestling gym, and the kind of modern gyms, because India's got those too. And it's like the modern gym is this sort of mechanized, kind of almost like automaton, robotic sort of place contained within inside a building, whereas the traditional gym is this courtyard with a roof over the wrestling pit and trees and water and like earth and nature around you, and that is actually part of the actual experience, as part of the way you train, because you feel that kind of connection with nature and that which is around you. Like your vibration, your literal human vibration is different because you're actually able to connect in with the earth, and actually kind of operate on a completely different level, both sort of spiritually, psychologically, and physically, because you are in nature, not in a room.
Yeah. Do you know, when I lift stones, I actually like to do it barefoot. I
Yeah,
like to be in
I
touch with
like.
Mother Earth.
Yeah,
And I just feel better. I generally only wear flip flops anyhow, so it's not much of a change, and it's a bit more stable without them. But I feel better. And I used to train in a gym that had a little lawn out back, and between sets I'd go out and just have a little walk on the grass barefoot.
yeah,
And it's so
brilliant.
relaxing. It changes your energy a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It does. I mean, it's what these days they call it like grounding,
Yeah,
or something like that. But like, there's truth to it, because there are energy fields in the earth and in your body, and like
yeah,
ultimately the frequency of those energy fields, so whatever you want, electromagnetic fields, whatever you want to say, like that's the same as us, is the earth. So I mean, when you do that, you're kind of connecting in with actually an actual kind of almost pretty much quantifiable, magnetic or electromagnetic energy, the electricity
yeah.
in the earth, electricity in your body, So it's like touching the earth with your actual bare feet, I think is fantastic. I mean, I try as much as possible. Like at this time of year, it's great. I'm basically barefoot all day long.
Yeah. Well, no, like my friend's got private land where we lift the stones, and once I'm up there, I generally kick my shoes off and pot them out on the grass without my shoes, because it just feels
Yeah,
great, doesn't it? And it feels
fantastic.
like you're on holiday as well.
Yeah, it's brilliant for you.
Trying to ask you something else, and I had another probing question for you there, Tom. Ah, that's what I was going to say. When I was in Milton Keynes, I was there for a BKFC event
Oh yeah,
with my head coach. And so, am I right in thinking that you've coached a guy in the BKFC as well?
I did. I helped. I helped a friend of mine, Brett Williams. He was on BKFC, and also Vala BK. I think he's done a couple of different. We actually originally. I used to work a lot with him. So it's called Brett the Widowmaker Williams is his Instagram handle, but Brett and I were doing a lot to do with the original London prize ring rules style of fighting, which he was using a lot in the beginning. He's shifted a lot more to the Soviet style because it works well for him in what he's doing, and he's right in the fact that it works quite well for bare knuckle.
Yeah.
But Brett and I worked together a lot with in the London prize ring rules way of fighting, which is kind of interesting in this kind of old school stance, which is kind of low and forward like this. But we originally did a kind of a small event called American Prize Ring, and then there were a couple of those, and then we stopped on that. That was in Florida, and I'm up in Connecticut, so it's kind of a bit of a distance for me to travel. It was, but yeah. So Brett is he's a guy who'll fight under almost any rule set. Ultimately, he's a born fighter, you know. But yeah, I did work with him, and he had a couple of fights on BKFC.
Did you attend the shows yourself, Tom?
Sorry?
Did you attend the shows? Did you go with him?
No, I didn't actually go to I didn't go. I haven't been to BKFC because, just circumstances at the time they didn't allow me. But
yeah, they put brilliant shows on. I'll be honest, they're the best shows I've ever been to. The ones they have over in Britain.
We used to have it was the UB Bad back in the day of the bare knuckle, and that became BK. BFC or something. I can't remember what. It became something else, but then BKFC is taken over. You know, they've just taken over.
Yeah, it's a great sport, isn't it?
When Americans get involved, they just go for it.
Well, do you know what? The BKFC, like I say, I've been to a few other bare knuckle shows in Britain. Obviously, David Feldman runs the BKFC, doesn't he? And that show we went to in Milton Keynes, the production quality of it, and that was amazing. I was at one in Newcastle the other week, and honestly, I think in 28 years in boxing and mixed martial arts and stuff, I've never seen a better fight card in my life.
Wow!
Every one of them. There wasn't a fight where you didn't want to watch. There wasn't a fight where you weren't watching it.
I tell you what, hard and you're like, oh well, forget this. What you know.
Do you know what? How many boxing cards do you watch and you could fall asleep through half of them?
Oh man, honestly. Yeah, exactly. The thing is, I grew up watching boxing on TV. When it used to be on BBC or ITV back in the day. You know.
Yeah.
I used to grow up watching it. My dad had put it on, and you end up sort of watching it, getting excited.
Nigel Benn, Chris Eubank, people like that.
Yeah, but I don't think it's the same anymore. I don't feel like that about boxing anymore. There's occasionally you'll get a fight that's great, or something like that.
But you get the good, don't you? But I think them lads in the BKFC, they're all really up for it. They all come to fight and win. They don't come to sort of fiddle their way through. They don't come to not get beat. They actually come to actually have a fight, don't they?
I wonder how much of that is to do with the amount of money that's in boxing and the amount of politics that's in boxing, within the organizations, and how it's all organized so that people don't really get a real shot at things. And they all get their payday no matter anyway, and sort of makes you wonder.
In the BKFC, you've still got to make your money, haven't you? You've got to win fights and look good to get to a big payday, and that's what they're doing.
Well, it's kind of interesting because, if you read, there was A.J. Liebling's The Sweet Science, which is a book from the 1930s, and all about the New York boxing scene in the Great Depression. And he wasn't a boxer; he was just a guy who really liked boxing. He was a journalist, actually kind of food critic. He was extremely overweight, I believe. But anyway, he loved boxing, loved it, and he documented these fights of that time, the 20s and 30s, in this book, The Sweet Science. And it's amazing when you read it, because at that time there was no incentive to become a pro. Everybody had a lot of amateur fights, because in that time you'd get $2 every time you fought, and so you could fight once a week as an amateur on the local show. This is, especially before TV, people would go and pay to watch boxing. So every neighborhood would have a boxing card on all across New York City. And so the quality of boxing was incredible, because there was a lot of people boxing because they needed the money. There was a lot of people, and then most of them wouldn't go pro for a long time because they wanted to make that definite, consistent $2 for the week. For the week. As soon as you turned pro, you didn't get that anymore because you couldn't compete in those little shows. You had to go for the big, the one big purse, whatever. And so half those guys back in those days, they'd had 200, 300, 400 fights before they even turned pro. So the standard of boxing back then was incredible. Whereas now, people got to turn pro almost straight away. you know, they've had very few fights comparatively compared to what people used to have. You know, I mean, it's like if you look at Thailand, the Thai boxers, they've got like 300 fights.
Oh yeah, unbelievable. And they start fighting as little kids, don't they?
Yeah,
like
yeah,
you know,
exactly.
like knocking lumps out of each other with leg kicks and that.
Yeah, yeah.
So tough. I did. I had a bit of a go at mixed martial arts. I wasn't any good. But I tell you, the first time I ever got kicked in the leg. Honestly, the first time I got kicked in the leg. Oh man!
Yeah,
And it was honestly that was my least favourite thing. I didn't mind anything else, but getting kicked in the leg, and I never ever got tough to it. I'll be honest, I'm still a shitbag if somebody kicks us in the leg.
It's terrible. It's a terrible thing. I mean, yeah, I think everyone remembers the first time they get a really good strong leg kick. Like, oh, hang on, can't walk now.
I actually think it's actually worse than the body shot. Worse than a body shot in boxing.
I mean, it's a TKO. I mean, you get a good strong leg kick in, they can't walk properly. That's that. You know, you get a 2-3 kicks in like that. That's the end of the fight.
Horrible, horrible, and it's sort of like it's like a horrible way to lose, isn't it? It's an undignified way to lose almost. I'd rather get my head chopped off.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I think as well, like with the Brits as well. Like we always thought kicking was a little bit, you know, it wasn't very honourable, and I mean, it kind of.
Yes, but you know, it works, is it?
It was like the idea that, you know, it was like, what was it, an Englishman stands up with his 2 fists, you know.
Yeah, that's it. Like, funny, isn't it?
And it is, yeah. I mean, it was funny, I think, especially when boxing really was the king in England and bare knuckle boxing. It was like, oh, well, the Frenchmen are the ones who kick. Like, we don't kick.
Yeah, that's right. They had the Savate thing, didn't they? And I think that's quite old, isn't it?
Yeah. What's really interesting is the very, very early part of boxing, so like 1750s, Jack Broughton era, they did used to kick the shin. It was possible, but like the same as, you know, shin kicking in England is that.
Yeah.
That was allowed to kick the shin, and it was called what's called purring like a cat. And so it isn't really designed to like hurt somebody so much as to sort of stop their advance forward. You sort of kick them in the leg, and then you can kind of go at them with your fist. But that died out pretty quickly. By the time, within about 60 years or whatever of boxing, they stopped purring entirely, I think. Pretty much.
There was obviously elements of wrestling in that as well, wasn't there? In the bare knuckle, originally a few throws and stuff, wasn't there?
Yeah, there were. I mean, I think the second to last considered to be really bare knuckle champion of England was a guy called Sam Hurst, and he was called the Stallybridge Infant or something like that, some weird nickname like that. But he won. He was a wrestler, pure wrestler, and he won by just picking the guy up and pile driving him head down into the ground. Right. You know?
That's another thing, isn't it? That again, people don't appreciate how much it can hurt you being thrown.
Oh yeah.
Like the old one of my favourite comments is like about grappling. Is like it looks gay. Grappling looks gay. It looks like cuddling. People only say that till they've grappled, don't they?
Right.
Until they've been choked, until they've been armbarred or slammed on the floor, then it doesn't look gay anymore, does it?
Hit them with the earth. You know, like if you hit someone with the earth, bang. Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Just going back to the shin kicking.
Yeah.
Can you, that again, as a man who doesn't like being kicked in the leg anyhow, that just looks like I can't fathom that. That's probably the one fighting spot I can't get my head around.
So what's really interesting is yes, they do obviously do that as a country sport, you know, shin kicking, where they put straw into the front of the trousers and like kick each other in boots on, which is insane. But when I go down to Cornwall to Cornish wrestling, I'm also going across to Devon on my way back. There's a group that do Devonshire wrestling, and Devonshire wrestling pretty much was extinct, but they're making a resurgence again now because they're kind of working with various different things, and there's a few guys down there doing it. And the difference between Cornish wrestling and Devonshire wrestling is so Cornish wrestling, you got the jacket, they both got the jacket, and you can trip them up with your feet. But in Devonshire wrestling, you can kick the legs. You can actually kick it. And I think they originally wore boots too. So you can actually kick the shins, just like in shin kicking. So it's a bit more violent, like a more violent version of Cornish wrestling.
They'd be hobbling up to Cumbria.
Yeah. I'm going to wear shin guards if we're doing that, I'll tell you.
Oh, good luck with that, mate. Have you ever been to the Snake Pit at Wigan?
No, I'd like to go. It's almost. I went to the American snake pit, which is different. But like, I'd like to go to the one in Wigan.
We were lucky enough. We actually had Billy Robinson in our gym a few years ago.
Oh wow!
My friend Alex went and trained over in Utah with Billy, and got certified as a catch wrestling coach. And then when he came on, he actually came to our gym.
Yeah.
The catch stuff's awesome, isn't it? And again, I really enjoyed training that. I've done a bit of jiu-jitsu and stuff, and a bit of just general sort of like no-gi grappling. I enjoyed doing the catch because of the historical elements. To know that, especially like up here, up in North, that's pretty much, like it's not a million mile away from Cumberland, is it? Lancashire.
No, basically kind of called at one point before it was called catch. I think it kind of came out things like what's called Lancastrian wrestling, and definitely. I mean, so my dad's family's all from up there. My name's Billinge, and Billinge actually is the town. Means someone from the town of Billinge, which is a town in Lancashire. Small town. That's why everybody with the very weirdly rare name Billinge is all mostly located in that area, and that's where my dad's from up there. So while I grew up in Cambridge, actually, all my dad's side of the family are all like Lancashire area, around Manchester particularly. Actually, they're all from Manchester. So I feel the same thing about that. I'm very interested in catch because it's the neck of the woods that my family came from, and it's like very old. And it has a modern application as well. And it's like,
I'll tell you what, it definitely does.
Oh yeah, for sure. And if you do catch and jiu-jitsu, you can mix them together really well and make something really great of your own style.
I tell you what, I think one of the biggest differences for me when we were training catch, pretty much everything was flat out.
Yeah.
Jiu-jitsu is the gentle art, isn't it?
Yeah,
catching the violent art, isn't it? And do you know what? On Monday nights, at one point, we had a 2-hour catch session.
Wow!
And I'd go home and you had to scrape us off the sofa to put us in the bath and give us my tea. Ruined.
I get
After the 2-hour jiu-jitsu session, I'd wandered out of the gym feeling bright and breezy, and I could just potter on, and I felt all right. But after a catch session, I felt like I'd been run out. Physically wrung out. What a tough spot.
It's always go hard, isn't it? That's the thing about catch is you always go hard.
Out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm kind of lucky. Like our gym, it's a jiu-jitsu gym, mostly no-gi, and the attitude there as well for most people. Like when I go there, especially certain days, like a Tuesday or a Saturday, particularly like that, they still go flat out. So I'm kind of lucky like that.
Yeah. You definitely need a bit of that, don't you? But if you still want to do so, I mean, I don't even grapple anymore, to be fair now. I mostly just do the strongman bit and that. I still spar a few rounds of boxing. I'll be honest.
You'll never lose, especially if you're striking, if you're a boxer and you're boxed, you never quite lose that. You're always capable of getting in and doing a few rounds. You see those videos of people in 70s and 80s, even old boxers. They're just you stick them in the ring just for they haven't got the energy to do too many reps, but you put them in and it's boom, they're in it.
Yeah, you can still see it. I think it's like riding a bike, isn't it? And I think it's a very simple sport, boxing as well. So there isn't a million skills to master, is there? So I think once you've got mastery of the balance and that.
Once you get to that level of mastery, though, it's it's almost sublime, when you see a really great boxer moving around, even when.
Oh, it's awesome. Poetry in motion, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
I think because it's such a sort of limited sport with limited elements, it lets the level of it be fine-tuned so perfectly, doesn't it? And also because it's a money sport.
Yeah, exactly. There's incentive
sport, isn't it? Yeah.
Sometimes you see someone come along who's just unreal. I remember when Lomachenko first kind of came onto the scene, and it was just this guy is operating on a whole other level.
It was like he reinvented boxing, didn't he?
Yeah, exactly. It's like he was making people quit, and he wasn't knocking them out. He was just.
I think he did it to about 4 guys on the bounce, didn't he? Just made them quit on the stool. Yeah, and that's the ultimate way of beating someone. And it just making someone say, I can't do out of you. Again, especially guys at that level, world-class guys. That's amazing, isn't it?
Well, as well, the interesting thing, going back to what we're saying about amateurs, is Lomachenko was very slow into the amateurs. He stayed, his dad was you're going to stay in the amateurs for a long time. He had 200 fights before he turned pro.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Who does that anymore? You know, so he had a long time to kind of hone his craft before he got into the pro level. And I think something like boxing would probably benefit a lot from that, from people just.
Well, didn't he fought for a world title after about 4 fights or something, didn't he?
Yeah,
when he turned pro.
I think 3 different weight divisions too. I think he went up.
Unbelievable, isn't it? And it just shows, doesn't it? That shows more than just the skill element of boxing.
Yeah.
Because I would say, I coach quite a lot of S&C stuff, and I'm a big believer in S&C because I think in any close fight, it's really important. But also, if you're good enough, if you're as good as Lomachenko, it doesn't matter almost what sort of shape you're in because you can just finesse your way through it, can't you?
Right.
Just dance your way through it.
Like technique always wins out. You know, for some, you know, I like to teach my students. You know, like I'm like, you know, if you throw in, if your technique's crap, but you're throwing it hard and fast, it's still crap. It's just hard.
Yeah.
I mean, like learn the technique, get the technique down, and then you can start to add speed and power to it. Like, but I mean, don't just try and add those things straight in without any technique. You know, it's never.
And that's what people want right away, isn't it? Because everybody wants to look like Mike Tyson on the first night, don't they?
Yeah, right. Well, how many people came in for a peekaboo around like this and then just got knocked out like straight away? Or
oh man, I've seen some superheroes over the years, you know. I'm sure you have as well in yours.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
Right, I'll tell you what, Tom, we'll have to call it there, mate, because I know you and I have both got things on. Absolutely fantastic having you on. Definitely do it again sometime.
Yeah.
And when we catch up in September, we'll make a few videos, bit of stone.
That sounds
and maybe a bit of. I'll admit I'm a Philistine here. Remind me of the name of the old Greek bare knuckle. Remind me the name.
Yeah. It's called the Greek boxer Pygmachia, and then so Pygmachia is the boxing, and Pancration is the MMA.
Yeah, well, I knew about the Pancration because of the MMA thing, but I'd only briefly heard of the Pygmachia, but I seen your video with
yeah. And
I think that was one of the first things that I was like, wow. That I thought that was super cool, to be fair, mate.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting because, like, actually, the old English bare knuckle guys, when they first started out, they were like looking at the ancient Greek images and going, "Oh, we need to be doing some of that." Except let's not wear anything on our hands at all.
Yeah. Well, that's it. I look forward to picking your brains about that and lifting some stones together.
Oh yeah, man! So, looking forward to it, Dave. Looking forward to it. Mate.
Until then, mate. Take care. And I'll see you next month. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.